Scottish authorities for quote-unquote misgendering people. Scotland has introduced a new hate crime and public order act for this exact thing, and she could get 7 years in prison. So basically, if a guy says he's a girl and she still says, hey, that's a guy, she misgendered them, essentially. But she doesn't care. She's going on X and saying, I'm currently out of the country, but if what I've written here qualifies as an offense under the terms of the new act, I look forward to being arrested when I return to the birthplace of Scottish Enlightenment. Wow. You talk about confidence. JK is letting it rain. Will they actually arrest her? I don't know. But this law is just absolutely insane. I hope it doesn't ever come to America. This is just, just because I misgendered you? I mean, if I look at you and you're a dude, if you look at me and I say, okay, all of a sudden I'm a female, you say, call me a dude, I'm clearly not a female. So this is, I don't know what's happening here. But JK, good for you. Way to stand up.
They will never arrest J.K. Rowling. She is a billionaire. Okay? That's not going to happen. They depend on her money too much.
Author J.K. Rowling has been thrusted into the culture wars. J.K. Rowling dares cops to arrest her for misgendering trans people after a new woke hate crime law. Scotland's new hate crime law went into effect on Monday, that was earlier this week, banning hatred on the basis of age, disability, race, religion, sexual orientation, and trans identity. There it is. There it is. Trans identity. Cool. You shouldn't be hating on people on the age, disability, race, religion, sexual orientation, all good. But it's almost like, don't believe my lying eyes. When the dude with the beard who wants to be identified as a woman says she a woman, you just want me to comply? I have to fall in line? I don't know about that.
In 2020, Kate Scotto, a radical feminist, was convicted of causing annoyance, inconvenience, or needless anxiety under the Communications Act after she referred to a male who identifies as female as he on social media. Scotto was arrested at her home in front of her children and claimed she was kept in a police cell for 7 hours. In 2022, a Christian preacher called David McConnell was found guilty of harassment after he referred to a trans person as a man and a gentleman on the streets of Leeds. In 2021, Marion Miller, a feminist campaigner, was dragged through the Scottish courts on trumped-up hate crime charges related to her gender-critical tweets. And that was all before Scotland's illiberal new hate crime bill came into effect.
A bill creating new protections for transgender people will soon become law. Democratic Governor Jared Polis signed the Kelly-Loving Act today. This legislation expands the state's definition of discrimination to include intentionally refusing to use someone's preferred name. Also makes it easier for somebody to change their name on legal documents. The bill had been watered down. It now excludes language that would have had courts consider a parent's refusal to recognize their child's transgender identity. This legislation expands the state's definition of discrimination to include intentionally refusing to use someone's preferred name.
They're talking about as if you're trans and you're a boy but you want to be a girl, and so you change your name to a girl's name. By law, you have to use that girl's name. If you use the boy's name, you're breaking the law.
A major survey in the US found that a plurality of people aged 25 to 34 now think using the wrong pronouns should be a criminal offence. Almost half of them think you should be prosecuted for saying he instead of she, if that he is becoming a she, or if he or she just wants to be they, or thinks they should be a she, he, they, or something like a cat. You could be forgiven for being as confused about this as some of them are. And criminal offence or not, the tyranny of the pronoun police is all around us. Misgendering can get you kicked off YouTube, which for some people has removed their main source of income. It briefly led to the What is a Woman documentary by Matt Walsh being banned on Twitter. And Oxford College just warned it will expel students for misgendering each other. The UK government's long-awaited guidance for schools on trans pupils has today been delayed, reportedly because of legal wrangling over whether teachers must use a student's preferred pronouns. Many businesses now require their staff to wear pronoun badges or sign off their emails with their pronouns. And if you accept all of that, criminalisation probably looks like the logical next step. Yeah, sling the miscreants in prison. Now, in my view, what should actually be illegal, if you're going to get into gender criminality, might be the idea of biological men destroying women born with biological female bodies in women's sport. That's a bit of a crime to me. Or biological men demanding access to female changing rooms. full of biological females, many of them very young, or biological male rapists who identify as women at their trials to get into women's prisons. Maybe that should be a crime. And if you think that makes me a transphobe, I'd say you're the one with the phobia of common sense.
For centuries, Britain was a bastion of democracy. Today, it's become a bastion of censorship. Police hunt down and charge anyone who expresses what the government says is a wrong idea. Dale Hurd brings us that story from London.
When a British lawyer and free speech advocate wanted to test the United Kingdom's censorship laws, she tweeted that perhaps her cat is a Methodist because it likes Dreamy's cat treats. Then she asked a friend to report her for hate speech against Methodists to see what might happen. And local police issued a case number. Sarah Phillimore then tweeted more nonsensical posts about her pets and says she now has a police record.
And it was recorded under the heading, "A Barrister Posting Hate."
When British police stopped Army veteran Adam Smith Connor as he was praying for a son lost to an abortion while standing in an abortion clinic buffer zone, officers' first question to him was, "What is the nature of your prayer?"
What is the nature of your prayer?
I'm praying for my son.
And for that, Smith Connor was convicted of what many are calling a thought crime. Dr. Kelvin Wright, also a British Army veteran, saw his military career effectively ruined after being put through an Army disciplinary process for sharing a social media post in favor of women's rights that offended a transgender British soldier. Although exonerated, Wright left the Army.
So you ask me what the moral is? Well, the frightening moral is don't say any opinions.
British police have investigated 250,000 so-called non-crime hate incidents in the last 10 years, an average of 66 every day, and some have gone to prison. When it comes to freedom, Britain is at a tipping point. This is a nation that prides itself as being a champion of liberty, and yet some are warning that Britain is sleepwalking into a totalitarian future. Toby Young, the founder of Britain's Free Speech Union, says a few years ago he thought the censorship in Britain couldn't possibly get worse. Now he says that was naive.
I liken it to falling through a burning building. You know, every time you think things can't get any worse and you've finally reached rock bottom, the floor gives way and you're falling again.
Some, like London Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, have been investigated for social media posts a year or more old. What Toby Young calls offense archaeology. Get charged with a non-crime hate incident and it can become a stain on your career, showing up on background checks.
No reasonable person wants to have on a police record that you are guilty of some form of hate.
After former police officer Harry Miller faced charges of what police labeled transphobic hate speech in 2019, he began the organization Fair Cop to challenge law enforcement interfering with free speech. He was joined by Sarah Phillimore.
The vast majority of police officers in this country are sick and tired of this nonsense. They too have to be careful about the opinions that they express, because they too can find themselves at the wrong end of a non-crime hate incident, a disciplinary, and potentially being thrown out of the police force. But I've seen far too many police officers who look like they are enjoying what they're doing.
British common law is supposed to protect speech. However, news commentator Connor Tomlinson says you can't say Britain has free speech when only speech approved by the government is allowed.
So no, we don't have free speech in this country. Instead, if you're a Christian, if you question the open borders mass immigration agenda, or if you say some, let's say, febrile and ill-advised things on a social media app, but you are not a member of a state-approved left-wing NGO, then you will be sent to prison.
Adam Smith Connor says his legal ordeal has been personally tough after he fought for freedom in Afghanistan, risked his life, and lost friends there.
I've got a profound sense of sadness that for our nation, that the fact that we have plummeted to such a depth so quickly.
In his book 1984, George Orwell depicted a future totalitarian state modeled after Stalin's Soviet Union. He probably never imagined that Britain one day would be described as Orwellian.
The idea that you can be criminalized for a non-crime, for instance, it's pure Orwell. This is straight out of 1984. As I told the police, 1984 is a dystopian novel. It is not a police how-to manual.
Young believes free speech can be restored in Britain, but citizens must get involved.
If we abandon our belief, our commitment to free speech, it'll be not just catastrophic for us, but catastrophic for the rest of the world.
Dale Hurd, CBN News, London.
A retired police inspector from South Wales, 20 years in the South Wales Police, 10 years in the London Police. They've been going towards the left. It used to be the old style. We used to be impartial. We prided ourselves on being impartial. They left in 2011, but I'd say 2006 onwards, you'd have Stonewall coming in, you have diversity courses coming in, and you gradually drifting towards the woke sort of police force and the left wing. So they were no longer impartial. They got themselves involved in politics, and obviously the policies, the recruitment and the procedures, and then drifted away to the left wing, and they became a political force. But coming back to the old, yes, it wasn't perfect. We all know that. There's good ones and bad ones. But these days, up the top, when you got the top officers, they got degrees, they mix in the left-wing politicians and organisations. There's only one way it's going to go. They're enforcing this downwards. If you want to get promotion and keep your jobs, you've got to toe the line. And that's why we've got problems now.
He said that he was a community liaison officer. He said, well, are you Harry the Owl on Twitter? There's been a complaint about some of the views that you've expressed on Twitter. Somebody's complained and said that your place of work is not safe for trans people. And this is when my old policing head kicked in. And he said, I need to check your thinking. And that was the moment. They were the very words he said, I need to check your thinking. I was a police officer a long time ago. I was a police officer back in the 1800s for about 10 minutes. That's the truth of the matter. Actually, it was back in the 1980s and 90s. It didn't particularly suit me. I didn't like being at the bottom of the pile. I think I would have made an excellent chief constable, but unfortunately you have to be everything else before they're allowed to do that job. Having been a police officer and having family who are currently in the police, the whole notion of the police didn't have the mystique that it has with people, members of the public, who aren't used to the police. So when the police did approach me in 2019, I think I was entirely the wrong person to approach because, one, I have no particular awe of the police. I respect them, but I'm not in awe of them. And I've also retained a very, very good level of knowledge when it comes to law, criminal law, and the principles behind law. So I was just the wrong guy for them to turn up and pick on in 2019. So that's it, really.
Yeah, take us to that fateful day.
Okay, so I was down at Tesco's car park, having done some shopping for my wife, and I received a phone call from my managing director of the company, and he rang me. He ran the company for me. He rang me and said, "H, we've had the police here." I said, "Oh, right." So naturally, I operated very large machinery, etc. I thought there could be any number of things that could have gone wrong that the police might be wanting to speak to me about. Apart from anything else, it's a dock. An awful lot of drugs come through the dock. People get injured and killed on the dock. We have machinery running around on roads which are quite dangerous. So there are any number of things that the police might have wanted to speak to me about. Anyway, I rang the police officer back, and it was a chap called PC Gull who introduced himself as being a member of Humberside Police, my old force, actually. And he said that he was a community liaison officer. And I said, "Oh, very, very good. And why do you want to speak to me?" He said, "Well, are you Harry the Owl on Twitter?" And I thought that's a bit of an odd question. I said, "But yes, I am." He said, "Right. Well, there's been a complaint about some of the views that you've expressed on Twitter." I said, "Right. Tell me more." He said, "Well, somebody's complained and said that your place of work is not safe for trans people. Nevertheless, he said that, well, somebody was very concerned because the trans people in my place of work, and at the time I was employing around about 80, 90 people, I think, were unsafe, and therefore that they needed to speak to me. I said, well, has there been a complaint at all from anybody in my work? He said, oh no, this is a complainant from a different part of the country.